Hello, everyone. It's Chris Kugelhahn. I really appreciate you guys taking the time out of your schedule to join us today. We got some pretty cool things we're going to talk about today. Um, One of my partners, Steve Robbins, is going to be interviewing Scott Myers from Denver, one of our top agents, uh, the last 3 years running. So, really excited to hear what Scott has to say. And obviously, Steve is one of the best at asking questions and digging deep. So, excited that that'll be a part of this. But we're going to go ahead and jump into this. And I'm going to kind of pick up where I left off in the last webinar. Um, we left off in the last webinar with 3 questions that I asked. I thought each of you needed to ask yourself, can I do it? Will it work? And is it worth it? I think in that presentation we forgot to define what it is. We talked a bunch about different things. So what I tried to do, bear with me here, is come up with what it is. In my brain, the C part of my personality is coming out here. But I first looked at call attempts equals contacts equals meeting set equals sales, and said, that doesn't make sense because those things don't equal each other. So then I wrote down, well, call attempts kind of correlates to contacts. It correlates to meeting set, and then all that correlates to sales. And sales is the real goal here for all of us. But then I thought, well, that doesn't define it. And then I started working backwards and said the sales, well, those are depending on our meeting set. The meeting sets are dependent on our contacts. And our contacts are probably directly correlated to the call attempts. Now, you can put text messages or emails or whatever you use to make contacts. But I'm going to use call attempts because I believe that's the best way that will get us more sales, is making those call attempts. Well, what's call attempts dependent on? I think it might be the it. There's a lot of different things I think that make up it. I mean, time, the investment of time, our agent's commitment, persistence is another one. The resources that you have available. Do you have the leads? Do you have the technology? Do you have the quiet environment to make the calls? Your efficiency and effectiveness. How good are you on the phone at overcoming objections? Are you able to just pull up a lead and click the call button without spending a bunch of time, reading the notes and, looking the person up on LinkedIn, for example, before you make the call? And then, your knowledge and your skill. Some people might say the weather is having something to do with it too. Here in Indianapolis, it's been awesome. But the conclusion I came up with is nothing can happen until it happens. And what it is prospecting. It's taking all those things on the left, probably a bunch more, throwing them into some algorithm and spitting out call attempts. Hopefully, Alex Shaner, who is our resident rocket scientist, could put an equation together a lot better than I could, but I thought it looked good. We have a bunch of agents doing it this year. I'm pretty proud of these agents. What we did is we compiled a list of the top 20 agents in the company as far as call attempts made. Basically, it went through from January to February 10th. I think these people are at, they've answered the question already, can I do it? They're doing it. The next question I think they've answered or are getting the answer to is, will it work? Some of the numbers, Tommy Henderson, out in Las Vegas, in the first 6 weeks of the year, he's had 6 transactions. It's worth $1 million worth of business. Robert McKenzie is just doing fantastic. He's turned in 11 transactions in the last 6 weeks for $3.8 million worth of business. Julia Fang, also out in Las Vegas, 7 transactions, $1.3 million year to date of business she's turned in. Scott Myers in Denver, I know I said I wasn't going to throw you under the bus, but $4 million coming soon. no pressure, and we're going to come back to that number at the end of this presentation. I'll show you where I got it from. You know, you look at these 20 agents that have done the most call attempts in the last 6 weeks in our company. These 20 agents combined did 14 transactions in 2016, January 1st through February 14th, for about $4.8 million. This year, the first 6 weeks, they've done 45 transactions for $10.6 million in business. And yes, yep, many of these agents are new to the company. You know, that is correct. And, you know, I think that that's awesome, because what this shows is that you don't have to be with us for years to be at the top of this list. You know, you can come right in and you can start making money if you have, you know, the desire to put in the effort. When I show those numbers, you know, people see that, you know, Tommy Henderson made over 2,000 phone calls or phone attempts in those first 6 weeks. And I had an agent call me this week and said, you know, that's great, Chris, but where are they getting these leads? You know, I don't have that many hot leads on my hot list. They're working all of the lists, you know, not just the hot list. You know, they're working the reminder list. They're working all their not contacted leads, or 30 days plus since contact. They're digging deep in their database. You know, when I was researching the definition of prospecting, everything that came up on the internet had something to do with finding gold or finding oil, or digging deep in the earth to find some sort of mineral. You know, we can dig deep right into the IMS. You know, leads by status. How many old leads do you have in there that are in non-responsive category? And let's not forget the past clients. You know, we have a few agents that are, you know, I just talked to one on Monday, made 18 calls to past clients, and he got 4 referrals of people that are looking to buy or sell right now. So, you know, the leads, the database is there for you to make those type of attempts. You know, something else we can't underscore enough is how many attempts you're making, you know, to a particular lead. You know, do you take a lead through the lead router, don't get a hold of them? Do you make one more attempt on that lead and then give up and take some more new leads? Or are you making 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, you know, in some cases, you know, 14 attempts per lead? You know, that's fantastic, Ken. I think that, you know, that may be beyond the tipping point, but, you know, we have a lot of agents making 4, 5, 6, and 7 calls per lead, and that, you know, that's another way you can get those call numbers up. A question that we've been asking ourselves, you know, we're very excited about all the recent success. We're excited to walk in the office and hear that Scott Reed made 700 calls last week. Or when we get an email from Scott Myers saying, you know, I made 1,000 phone calls and here's what I got out of it. You know, we are super excited. But is it sustainable? And this is where I think that some of our experience in the past can come into play, where we might be able to give you some insight of what to expect, you know, down the road a bit. Let's look at this graph and say, okay, on the left is prospecting calls per day. The bottom is your active clients that you're working with. I think right now we have a lot of people that are making, you know, around 10, 15, 20 calls a day, and they're saying, yeah, this is working. You know, I'm getting a hold of people, I'm scheduling appointments, this is working. So what those people eventually end up doing is saying, okay, I made 10 calls a day. What if I make 20, 30, 40, 50, or 60 calls a day? You know, will my success multiply? I'm going to say yes, it does. But what happens really quickly is you get really busy. You get busy with clients. You're out showing homes. You're doing research on the MLS. You're going to inspections. You're filling out paperwork. You're spending your time loading contracts into SkySlope. And all of a sudden, we don't have time to prospect anymore. And when we get down there, if you look at the end of that graph, now you're down to, you know, 6 or 2 active clients, and you go, whoa, wait a second. You know, what happened here? Well, you forgot to, maybe you didn't incorporate the prospecting into your daily schedule, during that really busy time. And so what you decide to do is, okay, I'm going to get back on the phones. I'm going to hit it hard. I'm going to make 300 calls a day, and start that cycle all over again. And what happens is it's a pattern that continues, or it could continue. Some agents are really effective with this pattern. We have, not many, but I could say we've probably had 3 or 4 in the last 15 years that can continue this pattern for year in and year out. But there's a lot of people that when they get down to those valleys, they get frustrated. And that's typically when they decide to either find another job or, really get a bad attitude. So what we're doing is I want to bring this to your attention now as we identify these. We see people making 2,000 calls in 6 weeks. What can we do to help them, down the road? I also think that we have people that are making 5 or 6 calls a day right now, and they're asking themselves the questions, can I do it? Is it worth it to be that guy that's making 60 calls? Well, we have a whole group of agents that do believe it's working and that it's worth it. They are making, 50, 60, 70 calls a day. But what we want to do is help them through the next step so they don't get frustrated. Another thing that you could add to this graph is time. This doesn't happen in days. It usually takes months. I wish we had leads that came in that converted tomorrow, that you could just get on the phone and make 100 phone calls and get a bunch of deals from it. That isn't typically what happens. You spend some time. Let's just say it's 3 months, and some of this may be shorter or longer depending on how you work the prospects you have. But you could be in these highs and lows for months at a time. In that month, that 4th column there in the green, it's going to take you a while to get back on the phones, to get your calls back up, to generate enough, where you're actively have 15 or 25 clients, that you're actively working with. Hopefully you can, weather the storm. You've saved up enough money from the previous 3 months where you were out closing deals, to get back on the horse and do the calls again. I also think that right now, currently, we have a few groups of agents. Group number 1, those are the agents that are asking those questions. Can I do it? Is it worth it? Will it work? We have over 100 agents in group 2, I believe, right now, probably closer to 200, that are day in, day out, working the hot list, finding the leads to call, setting aside the time to make the calls. And then in group 3, I think we have a handful of agents that are here. They were here before any of this even started, probably, where they're so busy that their entire day is filled up with appointments or working on, researching the MLS, running inspections, and things like that. What I want to do is go through each of these groups and give you some ideas on what you might be able to do, depending on where you're at, looking towards the future. I'm going to call this agents in group 1A. These are the people that are making, 2, 3, 4, 5 calls a day. Haven't really got on board. They're not sure if they can do it, that it'll work, or that it's even worth it. What I would encourage you to do is reach out to either myself or Steve or Brian, Ryan, Chip, your division manager, and talk to them, because it is working. And if you have a desire to do this, we're here to help. Also, talk to your peers. The people around you. Go into the office, find out who's making the calls, who's working the system, and talk to them. See what they're doing, because I think you'd find that they're there to help you too. And follow the sales report, because you're going to see the names that, those 20 names that we showed earlier. I'm going to guess those are the people that are going to be close or at the top of the sales report in the coming months. You need to try it. The opportunity is here now. we can't guarantee that that opportunity is going to be there forever for this group. Agents in Group B, you're making those 20 calls a day. What I'd ask is, that's fantastic. Keep doing it. But set small goals. If you're prospecting 30 minutes a day, see if you can increase it to 60 minutes a day. If you're making 20 calls a day, try and make 30. Just set small goals. Small wins add up, and we're super proud that you guys are making the effort that you are. Keep doing what you're doing if it's working. You also want to know your numbers. How much time does it take you to make 50 calls or 20 contacts? Keep track of that, because you're going to need that in order, once you get up into that, if you have a goal of selling 5 homes a month, you're going to need to know how much time it's going to take for you to prospect. And this is going to be different for different people. Some people will be able to prospect, 50 people in an hour. Some, it might take them, they will only be able to do 10 or 15 in an hour, because they have a little different method of, preparing for that call. But whatever it is, start tracking it now, because I guarantee it's going to get better. Agents in group number 2, does your schedule look like this? We're going to talk a little bit about scheduling, but a lot of people, I think, are just they're prospecting all the time at this point. They're building up those appointments, they're building up those clients. They're prospecting whenever they possibly can to get those 60 dials in every day. Could be 15 minutes here, it could be 2 hours here or there, a call night, a call day, but they're prospecting all the time, which is fantastic. Once again, know your numbers. Keep track of the time that you're putting in, so that when you do get busy with clients, you're able to say, yeah, I need to set aside a certain amount of time to prospect in order to hit my goals. At this point, when you're making 50 or 60 calls a day, your efficiency and your effectiveness should be improving. You're not, when I say efficiency, I'm talking about you're pulling up a list of leads and just clicking the call button, and you have the confidence that no matter what comes out of the mouth of the lead, you're going to have an answer for, and you're going to know what direction to take that lead in. So that's a skill, and I think when you get to this type of volume, you've acquired it. The effectiveness, I think we can all improve on our effectiveness. How do we handle objections? How do we ask for appointments? But everything should be getting better at that point. If you're in this group, you also need to start thinking about, or start preparing for the no time to prospect problem, because your schedule goes from all green prospecting to all yellow, which means you're busy with clients, busy with the busy work of your business. This is going to happen. It's guaranteed. We've seen it time and time again. Some of our most successful agents will come in and turn in 15 deals in a month, and then for the next 2 or 3 months, it's like they're busy just closing those deals, and then on the 4th month, it's like, crap, I forgot to prospect. Now I got to start all over again, and that takes time. So this is just something to be aware of. It's something for you to start thinking about, because it's going to happen. I had 2 questions for these people in group 2, because I think it's the majority of our agents right now. I went beyond just the 20 people that were on that list. I talked to a lot of people last week, and I asked them a couple questions. Number one, I wanted to find out how much these agents are spending each day on prospecting. This is kind of, I should have known the answer to this, but I think all but one person out of like 50 responded C, more than 2 hours per day. And the next question, which best describes you? Pick the best answer. I have set aside specific times to prospect each day. Or B, I prospect when I'm not busy with other tasks. Or C, it's a combination of both. Most people said C, but this is where it kind of got interesting, at least for me. This is kind of what I was expecting, but anyway, I'll share with you some of the responses I got. And see if you can figure out the words that were used in most of the responses. Like I try to, typically, or about 2 hours a day. I almost every day, or unless I have something else that comes up. Most days when possible, or some days that just does not work. I do not have a specific time set aside for prospecting. This could become a problem moving forward because as I get busier, it'll be harder to make the calls. If, those are the words that were used in the responses, which please don't get me wrong. I'm so proud of everyone. I know Steve and Brian and your managers are, all the efforts that you're putting in. What we're trying to do here is just prepare you for what's coming. There was one person that responded that I think summed everything up, and it was this. The more calls I make, the more responses I get, and the more distractions I run into pulling my attention from prospecting to things like appointments, looking up homes, or returning non-prospecting type calls. This is case in point. This is what's going to happen the more calls you make. You're going to get a hold of more people. You're going to schedule more meetings, and you're going to sell more homes. And there's only a limited amount of time in everyone's schedule, so something has to give when this becomes an issue. And it's typically the first thing to give is the prospecting. And just to be aware of this phenomenon that's going to happen, I think is the first step. What if we could turn that graph and look something like this, or is a little bit more balanced, where I'm making my 40 or 50 calls a day in, day out, and I schedule around them. I think everything becomes a little bit more predictable and less frustrating. I put together this example. I don't know if it'll work, but what I did is I said, okay, I need to prospect 2 hours a day. And at the beginning of the week, I just filled it in. Said I want to prospect an hour in the morning and an hour in the evening. But we understand, and that things come up. All of a sudden you have an appointment that got scheduled for Tuesday night. You can't prospect. But what we don't do is delete that hour. We move that hour somewhere else when something comes up. But we know that we're going to get at least 10, 15, maybe it's only 3 hours a week is where you're starting. But those are scheduled. Those are something that we have to get done. Some people may think, well, yeah, that's all a pipe dream. Maybe it is. If anybody could prove this theory or help me with this theory, it'd be greatly appreciated. But we have to just set aside specific amounts of time and don't let things interfere. And when they do interfere, move that time somewhere else, because the prospecting has to stay. Okay, let's see if I get my agents in group 3. This is quick. I'm guessing that your schedule looks something like this already. You're prospecting a few times a week, maybe in between appointments for 15 minutes here and there. Our suggestion, I think Chip, Ryan, Steve, everybody, we've been talking about this for a long time. But when you get to this point, you have to get rid of the tasks that you can pay someone else to do relatively cheap, like a transaction quarter, an admin assistant. You need to get back to where you can make some back to. Let me pull this up. Well, anyway, you get my point. Start thinking about that. Stop spending a half hour loading a transaction in the Sky Slope. Spend that half hour prospecting and pay somebody $10 to do it for you. Just start thinking about that. Last question, will it work? I'm going to share with you some numbers real quickly before we hand it over to Steve and Scott. But in January of 2016, we had 71 transactions from the leads that the company provided, and we did 186 total transactions. In January of 2017, those numbers were up 42% and 41 respectively, which that's incredible. Pretty excited about that. If we look at the first 14 days of February, and I know there's a lot of deals out there that just haven't been turned in yet, but these are the deals that we've gotten turned in. We had 42 transactions a year ago in February, 113 total in those first 2 weeks. And in the first 2 weeks this year, we've increased that number 76% from the deals coming from our leads, and a total of 43% transaction-wise across the country. We're super proud of that. You guys should be too. I mean, we hope that you're proud of it. We hope that we can actually double those numbers. Get everybody up to 100% more. The last thing I want to share, or close to the last, is something that I couldn't find where to put it in this presentation, but I thought it was kind of funny. Somebody responded to me, I prospect while I'm waiting for my kids, at home inspections if the client's not there, on the toilet, and on the go. That's what I call commitment. If there's a couple things that hopefully you can walk away today from this, and I think you'll probably walk away with a lot more after you hear from Scott, but I hope you believe that you can do it, that it does work, and it's worth it. So what I'd like to do now is introduce Scott Myers. Let me real quickly, I need to unmute Scott. He's unmuted, but Scott has been a top producer in our Denver office for the last 3 years in a row. In 2014, he did $5 million. He went up to 8.9 in 15. Last year, he did $11.1 million of business with our company. He's the #1 top producing agent in our Denver office. In 2017, I think Scott would agree, we're hoping he gets up to 20 million. Scott spends most Sundays on the slopes with his family. He almost takes the entire day off, but not quite. He comes home last Sunday after he sent me a bunch of beautiful pictures of him skiing and made phone calls. That's called commitment. And where this webinar originated from, Scott sent us an email a few days ago or a week ago where he said, you know what, I made 1,000 phone calls over the last month. Here's what I got out of it. And he goes on to list lead after lead after lead of business he got out of those 1,000 phone calls. It added up to about $4 million worth of business in my estimation. That's where I got that from, Scott. To recap, Chip is right. The system is a game changer if you work it correctly. Like my father used to tell me, son, if the phone rings, pick it up. Someone wants to put money in your pocket. Scott goes on to say, my father basically couldn't have predicted the system, but that's exactly what is happening. So what I'd like to do now is turn it over to Steve. Like I said, he's probably the best person that can dig deep and ask the right questions of anyone I've ever met. So Scott, are you there?
I am.
Awesome.
Hey everybody, it's Steve. Scott, excited to talk with you. I want to comment real quickly on what Chris was talking about. We've of course spent plenty of time in the last several weeks talking about prospecting. That's what we're going to talk with Scott a lot about, and looking forward to some of your questions. The sustainability of it and what that could mean for everybody out there. A quick story and an admission of guilt on my part. When we have been in business here for about 15, 16 years, and I've done a lot of the recruiting and interviewing over the years. And I used to have conversations with potential hires about the idea that you might come to Easy Street, Highgarden, because you don't have to prospect. And I got that wrong, not completely wrong, but a real paradigm shift. And the paradigm shift was, it's not that you don't come here and don't have to prospect. It's really that we make prospecting easier, because you aren't solely reliant upon calling your sphere of influence, burning through your family and friends, calling FSBOs and expireds at 8 o'clock in the morning before other people start calling them. You have all that at your disposal, and hopefully particularly past clients. And I want to talk a little bit too about Scott and how the evolution of his business is a great illustration for what it could be and what does maybe make us special and different from a traditional office. So maybe it took us a while, but we finally saw the light. It is all about prospecting, And the sustainability of that, I've been talking a lot lately and beating the drum of prospecting is the thing you schedule around. And as Chris, I thought, beautifully illustrated in those graphs, a lot of us aren't at that point yet where we need to schedule around it. But as the one agent astutely pointed out, it's coming. They need to start thinking about it. It's a goal, certainly, for you to have it in your schedule. It's the thing you schedule around because you're a professional and because that's what a professional does. They set their schedule and not let the tail wag the dog. But we're all getting there one step at a time. Scott has been there. He's ahead of the curve compared to most of us. And one of the, Chris pointed out some of the numbers Scott had, but to also illustrate what Scott's done, he started with us in 2013. He had bounced around in the business for a few years part-time, 9 years prior to joining us. But in his first year with us, he did around $4.5 million. That's 2013. He had 18 transactions. 13 of those were from Highgarden leads, 5 of his own self-generated. By 2016, last year, where he did about 11 million, he had 32 transactions, 9 of which were Highgarden and 23 of which were his own self-generated business. That's an evolution we hope and actually expect for all of our top producing people. What we provide, the leads we provide, and the particularly with 2.0, the platform to prospect from. If you're doing your business right and you're staying in front of your clients for life, you're working your past client database and continuing to work our leads as needed, but your business should be able to take off. As we've said so many times, we can just help you get where you want to go that much quicker. So with all that said, Scott talked a lot about prospecting, and you and many others in our company have been reading the book Fanatical Prospecting by Jeb Blunt. What's been your biggest takeaway from that book?
The biggest thing I took away was that we're not alone. Every company in Salesforce needs salespeople, and they all need to prospect. The book reminded me what I knew was to be true, that you can never stop prospecting. And I just felt that book was speaking directly to our business. And like the graph that Chris had with the ups and downs, I did a profit and loss for last year, and it was a great year, but there were 3 periods last year where I did very little transactions, and everything was going well. And after reading the book, it occurred to me what I do for 30 days impacts my business in 90, and that evolution has just taken place over the last 6 weeks.
As people can see on the screen, we've got some of the questions here, but we'll be mixing in others. But how much time of day do you devote to prospecting right now?
I do 2 to 3 hours a day, both mornings and evenings, except every day. On Sundays, I ski. It's something that I make time for. I'm pretty efficient at it right now, and I'm not making 50 or 60 calls a day. I need to work on my call attempts, but it looks like I'm doing about 20 to 30 a day, and that includes
how long does that typically take you? An hour or two, you're saying?
Yes. So I wake up at 6 and I do market research by hand, the old-fashioned way on the MLS for the clients that they're ready to buy now. So that takes me about 45 minutes to do every day. Then I take my kids to school, which sort of speaks to my family time, and then I hit the gym, and I hit the gym until 8:45, and then my calls, the lead opportunities start hitting, and I'm in the rotation 3 to 4 days a week taking new leads. So I try to make time now for prospecting as much as I can. I guess we could talk about my typical day. I've discovered that a lot of people will pick up the phone at 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning simply to say, I'm working, I can't talk right now, which is kind of ironic because they were on my website, which prompted the phone call. So from now, for the last 4 weeks, I have not been doing anything in the middle of the day. I've been taking it easy. I eat lunch, I watch a little TV, I read a book. or I'm out showing houses. So, but I don't show houses every day. From 4 to 6 is my family time. You know, my kids come home from school. We talk about their day, help them with their homework, and then we get ready for dinner. And then I'm back on the phones starting around 6:30 to 8. And I have call nights every night. I've been doing that, and it's been very, very successful. Even when I don't want to do it, I pick up that phone.
So how much, if at all, are you starting to actually schedule your prospecting and getting into that place where if something else comes up, you try to schedule around that time? Are you at that point yet?
I was out Saturday morning. Again, family. I want to say family is first, but it's not. Sorry. I get up, I prospect in the morning. I had a soccer match that I watched my son play. Before the game, I was making phone calls. After the game, I scheduled showings and had 3 sets of buyers in my car, and in between, I was making phone calls. Got home at 4:30 and made some more phone calls, and then I had a night out with my wife. And so I'll get on the iPad, and I have my systems in place where I can make the phone call and I can see my screens. I have my MLS numbers, matrix is up, and I'm doing it on the fly.
Were you the one that said that you do it while you're on the toilet? Was that you?
That was not me. That's gross.
Well, someone's got you beat out there. You know, so we came out there, like Chris and Brian and I came out to all the markets in the last few months and rolled this out. And you had mentioned something to me yesterday on the phone that I thought was a good anecdote, that, you know, when we rolled this out, 2.0 hot list, and by the way, guys, there's some fatigue on this, I'm sure, from some of you. The hot list, 2.0, making the calls. We're only highlighting this because it works. We have heard from many of you that this is inspirational. We hope that to be the point. We're going to keep showing you the success stories, not just the activity from this, but the productivity from this. Scott, what was your initial take when we rolled into town and said, hey guys, look at this new toy?
I hated it. I thought Big Brother was watching me, making me do things I didn't want to do. And I talked to my division president, the other manager, and we're like, I'm banging my head against the wall making all these phone calls, because when it first rolled out, I had 80 or 90 hot list leads, and for whatever reason, they never went away. They just kept coming back, and I was so frustrated, saying to myself, I just called this person. What am I going to say? But I have to call them. So then I found a sneaky workaround, and you guys caught me and said, no, you do this, and then you made some magic happen, and you tweaked the system and said, you know, we want you to reach out and make a phone call or a text, and then those hot list leads will go away for 15 days. And so that changed my life. Because I just kept calling and calling and calling, and it seemed like it was going nowhere, because it was the same person over and over again.
Right.
So once the tweaks happened, it made all the difference in the world. The new capabilities, especially the hot list, the texting screens, it makes prospecting and organizing so much easier now. You know, and I'm a numbers guy, so checking out all the stats on the calls made and attempting all those calls really helped me focus. Now, when I get a hot list lead, I call them 100% of the time.
Well, and how did that change? Because that's something that's changed for a lot of people, because they were resistant to call. Hey, I just talked to this person. It seems like yesterday. Really, it had been a couple months ago. What was the breakthrough there for it with you?
You know, because people started picking up the phone. You know, in the old IMS, you would have a lead come on and you'd look at it, and there was no call to action. There was no oversight saying you need to do this. And so once I started making those calls, and if I have an activity set up for a hot list lead, because I just talked to them 2 weeks ago, after talking to you and Chris, I pick up the phone and I give them a call, and I just 5 seconds it takes to make a phone call. If it's someone I really had an in-depth conversation with, I'll just send them a text. Hey, how you doing today? Just want to check in and see how things are going, if anything has changed, or if I need to change up some parameters. And not one person has said, why are you calling me? You just talked to me. They never say it. that first phone call really made a difference. The contact, the 4 questions, and then the follow-up has been working.
So, having made over 1,000 calls in the first 40 some days of the month here, what's your biggest takeaway from that? How is that going to propel your business and the sustainability of it from 10 million, 11 million in 2016 to 20 million this year?
Well, last year I had a lot of great clients. I triple-ended some deals, had a buyer lead that had to sell their house first, and I sold their house to one of my clients and double-ended that, sold them a new house, and so I really wasn't prospecting at all. I'd call someone a few times and then set up a gateway was what I was doing. I'm like, I'm going to let the system do the work for me. So I was taking the leads I received for granted. I thought I had a plan to work the leads, but it turned out that I really didn't. I was just waiting for them to do something, to put money in my pocket. And so with the new system, it's I'm not going to wait. I don't like to hear somebody after 3 months that I haven't called them, oh, we bought already. That really makes me sad.
Well, you're not the only one that's felt that pain, that's for sure.
So, and I'm just going to mention a name, that there is an agent in our office. He's quiet, he's reserved, he doesn't think very highly of his capabilities, but I got a report that said that he made 4 more sales than I did last year, Highgarden leads, and that really impacted me because I thought that I was doing everything I could, only to find out that someone actually beat me. So a shout out to Ed Ross. He's my motivation this year to double my Highgarden leads.
Oh, that's awesome. We need to have that on next, it sounds like, if he's that much better
absolutely.
than you. Yes. So, and speaking of other agents, you've had some agents that saw the email that you had sent out. Chris had forwarded that. They've reached out to you. You inspired them, as Ed has inspired you, it sounds like. What kind of advice have you given them so far?
Well, going back to fanatical prospecting, I learned and discovered that we interrupt all of our leads on a daily basis. That's our job, is to interrupt. And everyone's busy, we're busy. Utilizing the 4 questions, I've established a script that allowed me to keep them on the phone and establish a relationship with them. And so not only just talking to them about real estate, but talking to them about other things in their lives. I use my children. I find out where they're from and share with them that I've been there, or anything other than real estate. I learned that no one really wants to be bothered that many times a day with 8 or 9 or 10 phone calls, and so I've refined my attempts to 4 to 6. I use the Scott Reed approach. The lead comes in, you take it, and 20 minutes later you call it again. And let me tell you, that has really picked up my contact rate. I was at 70 contacts a week in January, and right now I'm at about 80 a week. So I'm really getting some great feedback from that.
Well, it's great to hear that text that's followed up 20 minutes later. Some people, maybe Scott inspired some people last time we had this to try that 20-minute later. Chris explained why we felt like that was a good opportunity to try again. You see that phone number coming on your caller ID for a second time, and it just puts an itch to you that you kind of want to scratch to see what's going on. So you've had good success with that since the Scott Reed webinar?
I have, and so everything in the system is so automated, and you're only asking us to make phone calls. So by the 3rd or 4th attempt, I don't leave a voicemail the first time, nor the second time, but the 3rd one I will, because I know that they're getting touched a lot, and so I take care of the lead. I see what they're doing, and then I put on the suggester, or more times than not, I make a gateway, and then I cast them off until they pop back on the hit list, or the hot list. I think that we want to get in front of them. So opposite of not doing anything, I felt like I was doing too much, and I wasn't gaining. I was not gaining any more contacts or any more conversations by taking one lead. That's just my perspective.
Scott, you really hit the nail on the head with something there, and something you said a little while ago, which is about our system, and something we've talked about a great deal, but I wanted to highlight with inside of your context. Our system does the automated text, it does the automated emails. We are expecting you to make the phone calls, and you had said in one of your answers a little while ago that you were oftentimes, instead of making that additional call to the hot list, which you're doing now, you were just kind of letting the system follow up with the automated gateway and suggest emails. What kind of pushed you over the edge? Was it just the hot list itself that pushed you over the edge to actually try to get them on the phone instead of just letting the system in the background try to heat these people up for you? You know, what really changed there?
You know, I think that what I was doing for the last 2 weeks, which prompted my email, was that I had so many people responding to my phone calls and then my text that I felt like, you know, they might think it's a sometimes they clients will just, you know, respond immediately, yes, you can help me, or no questions. But when there's just a quick text, hey, I just wanted to check in, and they've been really receptive. You know, I have 7, 8 buyers that I'm working with right now. I've written offers, I've made listing appointments, and I have so many buyers coming online soon. So I don't know. I'm not questioning what I'm doing. I'm just doing what I think is right, trying to figure out what those clients, those hot list leads, really are looking for. And I think it goes back to the 4 questions, the initial objections, getting past the objections, but having the information in your head, what you want to ask them, regardless of what they're telling you. I want to get off the phone. I have a realtor. You know, Don Steger is like, well, everyone says they have a realtor. What can you get past that by telling them, well, what has that agent shown you? Why are you on my site looking at houses if you have somebody who's in your corner? Only to find out that they had someone else just like me contact them, and to get me off the phone, they say they have an agent. So, you know, it's just working on your scripts.
We had a question from an agent about the 4 questions. To let you know that along with other documents is available to see through the IMS in the sales training section. But Scott, real quickly, what are the 4 questions?
What have you accomplished so far in your search? You know, most people call and say, oh, I'm just looking, I just started. So what have you accomplished? You know, what are your goals? What are your price points? What do you see this transaction going to being like? And then what's the main reason you're considering the move? You know, tell me more about that. You know, paint the picture. That's my Ryan. Paint the picture. Go deeper. And then what, if anything, is affecting your time frame for the move? You know, and the answer is always, I have a hard time with perfect, but that's what Ryan, the big cheese Ryan, does. But tell me more about that. And then the last one is, what's most important to you in making the decision? And so if I can get to 2 or 3 of those questions, I have a higher rate of conversion. And I think Chris said that I had the highest first-time call durations.
What I wanted to interject there, Scott, is we do have a report that shows what percentage of the calls that you connected with through the lead router, the initial call attempt, lasted over 4 minutes. And you have one of the highest percentages, if not the highest percentage in the company, of when somebody answers the phone, keeping them on the phone for more than 4 minutes. You know, so you are building rapport. You know, you are asking the right questions, and you're not giving up. You know, it's not. I've listened to a couple of your things, and you know, you just keep asking questions until basically the people hang up on you, and that works because you are building rapport. You're uncovering things, and you know, you're building your relationship with that client. You know, in the past, I think we're getting a lot better as a group. But as soon as we used to, I'd say a couple years ago when we first, started the lead router the way we're doing it, the first thing that somebody always says is, I'm just looking or I'm just browsing. And to be able to not let that push you into a corner and look for the nearest exit door, you can get over that objection, and you do. I mean, you go into, one of those 4 questions or something about, where they're calling from or whatever. Nice job.
Right.
Good job.
Well, thank you. When I first started in real estate, I was with Gary Keller's prodigy. Her name was Chris Cormack, and she had a boutique Keller Williams firm in Northern Virginia. She had 10 buyers agents and 2 listing agents, and I was the low man on the totem pole, and I got the leads that no one wanted. And so it took me a year to work through all those e-leads that just no one wanted, and time again, my goal was just to get somebody at a meeting, get them face to face. And so that first year really helped my business. Now I'm getting all, A and B buyers. I mean, sometimes they're, $100,000 leads, but there are all those gems of buyers. And if not me, who? If it's not me selling them the house, who's going to sell them the house? And I tend to put myself up when I'm talking on the phone. I tell those customers how good I am, and if they want referrals. And I might not be the most confident on the phone, but I try to exude confidence, and anything to make me stand out versus any other agent that they've spoken to on the phone.
Excellent.
Well, so I don't think you're having to fake it until you make it anymore, Scott, because I think you're making it. But anything else specifically you want to add about your plan this year to go from 10 to 20?
Yeah, well, the texting and emails versus calls, I've been having a lot of success just recently, where I would call on that 3rd or 4th call in the evening. And Chris said that there's a suggest button that's going to send automatically some homes that they haven't viewed yet. And so what I've been doing is I've been sending them houses based on their clicks, and everything is right there on that screen. It's amazing. And I just find a house in the price point within $1,000 that just hit the market, and I send it to them. What do you think about this property? And I'll add to the CAN script, this one just came on the market. It looks like it's going to be a great fit.
You're talking about texting that property, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And so that's really been powerful. That I'm taking the time in a text, and the texts have been responsive. Not everybody looks at their email. Not everybody wants to pick up their phone. But that text comes in, and if they're looking online and they see that text, they go right to it. I mean, it goes right to it. I had, I think, 3 or 4 contacts yesterday alone over the course of 12 hours where they responded back to me. My plan to continue is, I've read most of the Fanatical Prospecting, and I never understood why I wasn't busy 12 months a year. I found that if I really worked hard for 1 month, I could never keep that drive alive. And in the book, I discovered that I was making a big mistake, like most people, and not prospecting consistently. I went back over the past 12 months and found out that I really did slow down several times a year. So I've changed my ways. I'm prospecting 3 mornings, at least 3 mornings, at least 2 evenings, to make calls to my database. I'm really efficient, so it's easy. I don't waste any time looking or researching or figuring out what the last conversation was. I just dial the number, and as I'm waiting for them to pick up, I glance at my notes. I check the last property they clicked on. I look what more importantly, what the heck I sent them, because 9 times out of 10, they clicked on the email that I sent them. And there was nothing worse than not knowing this, and having a conversation based on something that I wasn't really understanding. So, if I scroll down, and when they pick up, I'm like, that's outstanding. I'm great. Let's talk, and let's have the conversation. If not, I just move on. I don't take it personally. I just press another button, because we're always interrupting our clients. I just apologize with them with a smile on my face and continue to interrupt. I've established the relationship with these leads. They know who I am, and they know that I'm in business, and I don't get paid until I sell them a home. I tell them how awesome I am, how I always provide excellent customer service, and I'll follow up.
Hey, Scott,
And I'll follow up until they tell me to stop. Yeah.
We had a couple questions about the way you were explaining how you text them a property
Uh-huh.
that isn't one of the ones that they've looked at. And I wanted to share real quickly with everyone a little trick. Let's say that you want to text them a property and all the properties they've looked at are expired or they're pended, or you want to find a different one to send them than the ones that are in that list. You can click on one in the list, pull up the canned message, and at the end of that message, you'll see a URL, and it has an MLS number in it. If you replace that MLS number with any MLS number in your MLS, it will text that property or a link to that property instead of the one that they've already viewed. And a quick way of doing this is you could click on the button right next to, I believe it's the text button that says Suggest button, and it pulls up a list of all the properties that match closely to the ones they previously looked at on our site but have never looked at on our site. So you can pull that up, copy a MLS number out of that list and paste it into the text message and click send, and that'll work. So I had a couple questions on that, Scott. Wanted to cover it real quickly, but turn it back over to Steve.
And Scott, we've answered a few questions that people have sent us already, but one more, and if there's any other ones you want to send, please feel free to before we wrap it up. Chip in Vegas wanted to know how you landed on 3 mornings and 2 evenings. Do you feel like 2 evenings is enough for for your scheduled prospecting? Why 3 mornings and 2 evenings?
Because some of those days, on 3 days a week, I might not. I guess I prospect more than that, but the commitment to prospect for an hour or two. And so if it's just 10 to 15 minutes, I don't count that. So it's Wednesday. I've had call nights 2 nights in a row. So I've already done 2 evenings. I'm going to plan to do it tonight again. But we have after school events. I have 4 kids, so I can't always make it after Thursday night. So that was my low end figure.
How in the last year or so has your evening prospecting changed?
I never prospected in evenings. I like my adult beverage after dinner, and I decided that I was going to wait and not have my cocktail. And I never call people in the evening. I hated calling people in the evening. I hated interrupting people. But that's when they're online. That's when they're in front of their computers. That's when they're talking about this. Everyone's busy. So what changed was it came to the realization that that's when I can get a hold of many of my clients, and
no doubt.
It was an easy transition.
One thing I want to point out here is I think, from listening to Scott, and, he tries to do 3 mornings or 3 evenings or 2 mornings and 3 evenings. He prospects here and there between appointments or when he can. Scott made over 1,000 phone calls, in the last 6 weeks through our system. He took every Sunday, 90% of the day Sunday off. Scott he does have a life, and he still can fill up his call schedule or his contacts, his meeting set, his sales, managing all of that other stuff. And, I think it comes back to commitment. Scott's put it in his mind that he's committed, to setting aside some time somewhere to get these calls in. So I commend you on that.
I have 3. I have a listing appointment at 4. I have a showing at 6, and I have a new client that I'm meeting for the first time at 12:30. So I have a busy day today. I went to the gym. I picked my kids up from the doctor's appointment. I took my other kids to school. I really believe that you could do it all. It's the expansion theory. You have 5 things that you accomplish in a day, and it takes you all day. It's not that much more challenging to get 6 things done or 7 things.
Benjamin Franklin said, if you want something done, find a busy person.
Yeah.
I guess he was right. We're just under an hour here, Scott. You've been awesome. Thank you so much. Round of applause out there, everybody, to Scott.
I want to quick shout out to the Denver Highgarden agents, Ed and Jason and Donna and Lori and Don and Gina. Amazing group of agents. Love working with them. I don't know if I missed anybody, but oh, Chris, how can I miss Chris? Yeah, thanks for tuning in.
We've officially had our
Listening.
first shout out on these webinars. I'm sure there'll be more to come. Any final thoughts, Chris?
No, once again, thank you guys for your time. Hopefully, I know I've got a lot of good stuff out of this today and just getting it prepared. If you guys have any questions, please reach out to your manager, Steve, Brian, Scott. Let's keep the ball rolling. Hope everybody has a great day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.